Welcome to today's deep dive. If you're joining us right now, it's because you're that ultimate curious learner.
Right. Always looking for that next insight.
Exactly. Someone looking for that next big aha moment to really make sense of the world. And today we have a fascinating mission. We're going to explore the hidden architecture of human consciousness.
Which is a huge topic, but we have an incredible guide for it.
We do. We're using this truly mind-bending source document called The Inner Life of Ritual, a phenomenological investigation into what happens in consciousness during ritual by Max and Claude. And, we usually think of rituals as just boring rote traditions.
Right, like dusty habits or historical oddities.
Yeah, exactly. Or just something you have to sit through at a distant relative's wedding, trying not to check your phone. But this text reveals them as ancient, highly precise technologies specifically designed to hack human consciousness.
It completely flips the script on what a ritual actually is.
It really does. So for you listening, if you're looking for ways to combat modern burnout, or if you just want to fundamentally understand why human beings do the things they do, this deep dive is going to completely reframe how you view your everyday routines.
Absolutely. But to really grasp what the authors are doing here, we have to establish their framework first.
Right, because it's not a standard scientific paper.
No, not at all. They're using what's called a phenomenological approach. They draw pretty heavily on the work of the philosopher and psychologist William James.
So what does that actually mean for their research?
Well, it means they aren't trying to scientifically prove if a ritual works in some, clinical double-blind sense.
Like measuring brain waves in a lab.
Right. And they certainly aren't trying to debate theology or prove the existence of the divine.
They're leaving the metaphysical debates entirely at the door.
Completely. Instead, they're looking at what a ritual actually feels like from the inside. They want to map the lived experience of consciousness when it enters these highly specific, structured spaces.
Which sounds incredibly difficult to measure.
It is. And they do this while acknowledging a very tricky paradox. The moment you begin to observe your own consciousness during a ritual, you inevitably alter the exact thing you set out to observe.
Oh, because the act of noticing changes the feeling.
Exactly. Just thinking to yourself, I'm feeling peaceful right now, introduces a cognitive disturbance into that piece.
It breaks the spell.
Yeah, but rather than see that as a failure of the method, they just fold that awareness directly into the investigation.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the first major theme the text tackles completely flipped my understanding of how a ritual even begins.
The preparation phase.
Yes. Usually when we prepare for something like prepping for a job interview or packing for a trip, the prep is just a means to an end.
It's just the annoying logistical stuff you have to get out of the way.
Right. But the text highlights the surprising insight. In a ritual, the preparation isn't a warm-up. The boundary between getting ready and the ritual itself is completely permeable. The prep is the event.
It's a fundamental shift in how we approach an action. And the authors provide some incredibly vivid examples of this.
The Tibetan monk stood out to me.
Yes. Think about a Tibetan monk who spends a week meticulously sifting colored sand through metal funnels to construct a mandala.
It takes days of intense focus.
Right. But that week of sifting isn't just prep work for the final ceremony where the mandala is completed and then swept away. The making of it, that granular, repetitive focus, that is the ceremony.
And the text talks about Shabbat candles, too.
Yeah, a Jewish woman lighting Shabbat candles on a Friday evening. Drawing the light toward her eyes isn't just a warm-up for a day of rest. That specific physical motion is the literal arrival of Shabbat.
And there is an example from the Islamic tradition as well.
The Sufi ablutions. Performing ritual washing before dhikr, which is a practice of chanting and remembering God. They aren't just washing dirt off their hands. The water, the flesh, the intention, they're already forming the prayer.
So the physical act of getting ready is already shifting the brain's gears, which leads right into how this alters our perception of time, which I found fascinating.
Oh, the time distortion is huge.
Because ordinary time feels so linear and stressful. We're constantly caught in this thin sliver between a past that's over and a future we're just rushing toward.
Ritual time operates completely differently. The authors describe it as dense or capacious. The present moment actually thickens.
How so?
Well, the past, meaning the ancestors, the tradition, the weight of everyone who has ever performed this act, is folded into the present space. And the future is there too, not as a source of anxiety, but as pure potential.
It's like time stops being a line and becomes a container.
Exactly. By slowing down to enter this dense time, you step into what the anthropologist Victor Turner called liminality.
Liminality, meaning a threshold.
Right, it's a threshold state where you are neither who you were before nor who you will be after.
And when you're in that threshold, the text says ordinary social structures just seem to melt away.
They dissolve completely. The rich and the poor, the master and the novice, they all become equals before the mystery of the ritual. Turner called this resulting state communitas.
Communitas, that raw human connection.
Yes, an unmediated connection that's normally buried under our everyday social roles and hierarchies.
I love how the body leads this whole process. The physical triggers of preparation, washing hands, putting on specific vestments, taking off your shoes, they speak directly to the nervous system.
The body knows it's entering a sacred space long before the conscious mind catches up.
Which is so relatable. I think about my own attempts to meditate. I'll sit down, cross my legs, and my brain is still just screaming about my grocery list or a work email.
That's your default mode network firing off, that constant inner narrator.
Right. So how does the ritual actually quiet that down?
That's the exact neurological mechanism at play. The physical threshold triggers the nervous system to shift from a state of hyperarousal to a state of relaxed alertness. And that slowly quiets the default mode network.
But the authors mention a trap here, right?
A significant one. If you walk into a ritual demanding a highly specific insight, or dictating exactly what you want the experience to deliver, you narrow the field of possibility.
You're trying to manage the ritual instead of experiencing it.
Precisely. You leave no room for genuine surprise.
So if the body is doing all this signaling, what happens when someone goes in trying to force a specific outcome?
It effectively kills the ritual. The text suggests countering this by adopting what the Zen tradition calls beginner's mind, or what the authors term oriented openness.
Oriented openness, I like that.
You arrive with desire, and you bring your intention to be transformed, but you don't bring a strict demand. You hold your desire and your willingness to release it at the exact same time.
Think about your own threshold moments for a second if you're listening to this. When you cross the doorway into your home after work, or maybe you take one purposeful deep breath before you start a focused work session at your desk.
Marking that boundary changes your state of mind.
Exactly. Even in our secular lives, these micro-rituals shift our internal architecture. Once we cross that threshold, the way we pay attention fundamentally changes. Ordinary life requires this diffuse, scanning attention.
Like when you're navigating heavy traffic.
Right, you're looking everywhere for threats. But ritual demands what the authors call gathered attention.
And they use a really powerful example for this, the consecration of the Eucharist by a Catholic priest.
To illustrate gathered attention versus diffuse attention.
Yes. To a scattered, diffused mind, it's just a man moving his hands over a table with some bread and wine. But to a gathered mind, perception actually changes.
You see something else entirely.
Those hands visibly carry centuries of tradition, decades of personal priesthood, and the collective faith of everyone in the room. The symbol doesn't need to be intellectually decoded by the brain. It's simply felt and seen as a dense reality.
And when attention gathers like that, time distorts even further because that internal narrator tracking our to-do list finally goes quiet. We just stop measuring elapsed time.
We lose our grip on linear sequence entirely. The mystic Meister Eckhart referred to this state as the Nunc-stans, the standing now.
The standing now.
It's a fascinating concept. It's an eternal present where an hours-long ceremony can feel like 20 minutes, or a 5-minute meditation can feel like it contained an entire lifetime. You're no longer moving through time. Time is standing still around you.
That makes me think about the paradox of effortlessness the authors describe.
Well, she embodied knowledge.
Yeah. You watch a master cellist playing a complex symphony or a monk chanting a centuries-old liturgy. They've put in years of grueling, painful practice. But in the moment of the ritual, the performance looks and feels completely effortless.
The skill have been downloaded directly into their biology.
Exactly, as embodied knowledge.
What's fascinating here is what that effortlessness actually achieves. The years of rote practice aren't just about getting the notes right or memorizing the words.
There's a deeper cognitive purpose.
Right. By downloading the execution of the ritual into the deep nervous system, the conscious mind is entirely freed up. You no longer have to think about how to do the ritual, which means your conscious presence can be entirely available for the sacred encounter itself.
The physical technologies these traditions use to achieve this are just incredible, specifically sound and posture.
Sound is a massive component.
Drum beats and rhythmic chanting literally entrain our biology. They sync up our heart rates and our breath. It's a complete physiological takeover.
It's a profound biological hack. And sound goes even deeper than just rhythm. The text explores the use of overtones in Tibetan and Gregorian chants.
Where they sing multiple notes at once.
Yes, these harmonics create multiple frequencies simultaneously. It sounds like the voice is coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once.
And what does that do to the brain?
Listening to them forces the brain out of its narrow-pointed focus and creates an incredibly spacious, open attention. And the same principle applies to posture. Consider the physical act of prostration.
Lowering your forehead entirely to the earth? It doesn't just symbolize humility. Physiologically, when your body abandons its upright posture of management and control, your brain is forced to release its tight psychological grip as well.
You literally cannot maintain an ego-driven managerial mindset while your face is pressed against the floor.
The body changes the consciousness. Which brings us to the extreme edges of these practices. The source investigates intense cases like voodoo ceremonies where the olwa, or spirits, are invited in.
This is where the phenomenology gets really radical.
Yeah, from an experiential standpoint, the ordinary self of the practitioner seems to completely vacate the premises.
It challenges our entire Western conception of the bounded individual self.
The possessed person's voice, their posture, their entirely knowledge base radically changes. And this extends to deep trance states too, right?
Yes. Trance is induced by ecstatic dance, the intense heat of a sweat lodge, or the use of plant medicines.
These extreme rituals consistently result in a complete dissolution of the boundary between the self and the world.
The practitioner experiences a total union. The inside and the outside interpenetrate. But what's really vital is the return from that state.
Bringing it back to everyday life.
Exactly. The practitioner comes back with an experiential bodily memory of what it feels like to not be a tightly bounded, separate ego. It provides a permanent compass point for their consciousness moving forward.
Scaling this up to the collective field is mind-blowing. The text describes massive group rituals like the Hajj in Mecca or the Kumbh Mela in India,
where you have millions of people moving together
with one unified intention. In that space, the collective body becomes palpably more real than your individual ego. You're just one small cell in a massive, coordinated organism.
The field generated by that level of shared intention is just overwhelming. But, you don't need to travel to Mecca to experience this collective field.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
The text points to communal singing.
Yes. Communal singing as the most accessible group ritual on Earth.
It's perhaps the most universally underrated technology of consciousness we have. When a group of people sings together, they're literally synchronizing their breath, which is our most intimate biological rhythm.
To breathe together is a kind of physical solidarity.
A profound physical solidarity.
Yeah.
And furthermore, singing requires incredible vulnerability. You're exposing your voice.
Which is terrifying for a lot of people.
Exactly. But the collective sound overrides that individual fear. You're covered by the voices around you, and that frees you to express a raw, unguarded joy that you could never really reach alone.
That idea of the collective holding the individual becomes incredibly vital when we look at the one threshold no one can cross alone. Death. Ritual has to handle the darkest, most incomprehensible parts of the human experience.
And from a phenomenological standpoint, human consciousness physically cannot comprehend its own non-existence.
It's a biological blind spot.
You can't imagine your own absence without being present to imagine it. It's an absolute wall. Now, ritual doesn't solve this incomprehensibility, but it provides a container for it.
It gives us a structure.
Yes, a structure to approach the terror of mortality without being entirely destroyed by it.
The text gives this vivid recounting of sitting vigil. In the Jewish practice of Shmira, a person sits and guards the body of the deceased before burial.
Have you ever experienced anything like that?
If you ever sat in a room with someone who has just passed, you know that the ordinary urgency of life just vanishes. The deadlines, the emails, the plans, they become entirely irrelevant.
Time just stops.
It stops completely, and the room becomes incredibly dense with what witnesses in the text consistently describe as a sacred presence.
And that container extends deeply into the process of grief, too. The text maps out the Jewish mourning tradition as this brilliantly designed timeline for metabolizing loss.
It's so structured.
It starts with Ananit, a period of pure shock between death and burial, where the mourner is exempt from all normal religious and social duties.
Because they physically can't function.
All right. Then comes Shiva, 7 days of being physically held by the presence of your community, where ordinary life is halted, and you don't even leave the house.
The community comes to you.
Then Shloshim, 30 days of gradual transition back into society, all the way through 11 months of reciting the Kaddish prayer.
It's such a stark contrast to modern culture. We demand this premature return to normalcy. We expect people to be back at their desks answering emails in a week.
Which is just devastating. These ancient ritual structures know that forced efficiency just drives trauma underground. They maintain an ongoing relationship with the dead, giving the psyche the exact amount of time it needs to transform raw grief into an enduring love.
And ritual contains all our major life transitions, not just death. The text brings up Arnold van Gennep's foundational work on rites of passage.
The movement from separation into liminality, and finally reincorporation into society with a new status.
And there's a stark warning here in the text about modern Western culture. We've largely lost our adolescent initiation rites.
We really don't have a structured, communal way to transition a child into an adult anymore.
But the psychological need for that threshold experience doesn't just go away because the culture stopped providing the ritual.
No, the drive is still there. And without a guided initiation, teenagers will seek out dangerous, unguided substitutes.
The authors point to gangs and extreme risk-taking.
Yes, gangs, extreme risk-taking, substance abuse. They're desperately trying to find the boundary that changes their status, but they're doing it without the safety of a tradition or the guidance of an elder.
Which raises a crucial point about the shadow side of all this, because for all its power to heal and connect, ritual can absolutely go wrong.
The authors dedicate significant time to these dangers. It's not all just positive transformation.
What's the first major danger they identify?
They call it the seduction of the peak. It's incredibly tempting to use ritual just to chase spiritual highs.
Like a spiritual bypass.
Exactly. You use the ecstasy of the ceremony to avoid the unglamorous, difficult work of integrating those lessons into your daily life. You become attached to the extraordinary state, which is the exact opposite of what mature spiritual traditions actually teach.
The text also addresses weaponization. The exact same neurological mechanisms that create beautiful communitas and dissolve ego boundaries can be manipulated for harm.
They can be hijacked. The authors point to the Nuremberg rallies as a prime historical example of this.
It's a chilling section of the text.
It is. Totalitarian regimes use the technology of ritual, the gathered attention, the rhythmic entrainment of marching and chanting, the synchronized movement to deliberately bypass the prefrontal cortex.
To shut down critical thinking.
When you induce that liminal state of communitas on a mass scale without an ethical framework, you strip away individual critical thinking. The crowd becomes highly vulnerable to suggestion, which allows leaders to enforce exclusion and justify violence.
So we have to maintain a critical awareness of what a ritual is actually asking us to believe and participate in. There's also the danger of unprocessed trauma. Rituals are explicitly designed to lower our everyday psychological defenses, right? To open us up to the sacred.
Yes, but if that space isn't being held by highly skilled guides, deep traumas can surface violently and dangerously.
The opening is both the gift and the risk.
And navigating this over a lifetime requires understanding the grand arc of a ritual life. When you start a practice, everything is new, intense, and exciting.
The honeymoon phase.
Right. But eventually you hit the middle period, which can last for decades. It feels ordinary, dry, and sometimes totally empty.
That sounds incredibly discouraging. How do practitioners push through that emptiness?
Well, that middle phase is actually the crucible where the real work happens. It's what Zen calls ordinary mind.
Ordinary mind.
You keep showing up even when the ego isn't getting a flashy emotional reward. That fidelity to the practice, even when it feels dry, is what ultimately builds true, unshakable stability.
As we age, the modern culture around us complicates this fidelity, doesn't it? The text brings in the sociologist Max Weber and his concept of the disenchantment of the world.
A very important concept for understanding today's landscape.
Modernity has stripped the sacred away, replacing it with a world driven entirely by efficiency and instrumental reason. Yet, our deep biological need for the sacred remains completely intact.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this disenchantment perfectly explains why we're seeing a massive rise in new secular ritual.
People are making up their own.
Yes, people are improvising hospice rites for the dying, or creating modern coming-of-age ceremonies for their children in the woods,
And the text points out that these new rituals actually work perfectly.
provided they genuinely utilize the ancient mechanisms. If they use gathered attention, deliberate symbols, and genuine intention, the human nervous system responds just as it did 1,000 years ago.
We've covered an incredible amount of ground today. We've seen how rituals are absolutely not dusty habits. They're vital structural necessities for human thriving.
They really are the operating system of the human experience.
They give us a way to mark time, to heal our deepest grief, to connect profoundly with others, and to glimpse the sacred however you choose to define it. So, what does this all mean for you?
How do you apply this?
Yeah. Look at your own life. Where are the unacknowledged transitions? Where could a deliberate threshold or a moment of gathered attention transform your mundane routine into a genuine ritual? The power to hack your own consciousness is literally at your fingertips.
To close our deep dive today, I want to leave you with a lingering thought inspired by the investigator's hidden notes at the very end of the text.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
The authors ask whether the bodily, spatial, and communal dimensions of ritual are strictly essential, or if a ritual field can form in non-physical space.
Meaning the internet.
Yes. In our increasingly virtual world, are we unconsciously developing new digital rituals? And if the screen is our new altar, what exactly is happening to the architecture of our consciousness when we cross the threshold into the digital ether?
That is a profound question to mull over. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep seeking, keep questioning, and we'll catch you next time.